Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to that special guest episode of That Trippi Show. No Alex today, but our guest more than makes up for it. I know many of you have been writing in with questions about the Supreme Court decisions, including what are Democrats going to do about their cash disadvantage, and what does the future look like for not just campaign finance, but how campaigns are run. I'm excited to welcome Tiffany Muller, president of End Citizens United. She's been leading this fight for over 10 years now, and nobody gets this issue like she does. Tiffany, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on, Joe. It's great to be here.
No, I'm really happy to have you. I want to start with the basics. For listeners who don't live and breathe campaign finance, what did the Supreme Court actually do in the NRSC versus FEC, and why are people calling it Citizens United 2.0?
Yeah, well, first of all, are there people who don't live and breathe campaign finance decisions or Supreme Court decisions? Whoever those people are, I want to be more like them. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was just a
both
few
of
weeks
us.
ago. Exactly, right? So just a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court it decided in the NRSC versus FEC decision that basically they were going to dismantle one of the last guardrails of campaign finance limits in our system. And it's being called Citizens United 2.0 because what we know is that it's going to empower more billionaires, more corporate
Mhm.
special interests, more big donors, and it's going to allow even more money into our system, which is already flooded with record amounts of unlimited and undisclosed spending. And this one is really, to your point, it's flown a little bit under the radar. I don't really think that most people have been tracking what the court did in this. But put simply, it used to be that there was a limit on how much party committees could give or directly contribute to candidates in a race. It's called the 441 AD for folks who have worked on campaigns.
Yes.
And a big part of that, yeah, we all know this. A big part of those limits were really to prevent corruption. And now those limits are gone. So the party committee is going to be able to give or contribute or spend unlimited amounts directly in coordination and on behalf of a candidate. And really, what this means is that voters are going to see even more attack ads. There's going to be more billionaire money going into these elections. You're going to have politicians and candidates who are even more unresponsive to the needs of their voters. And this is all coming with just, we're now what, 99
Yeah.
days out from the election. So, right now, what we know is that, frankly, the Republicans have more cash on hand in their party committees. Democrats do a better job of candidate fundraising, and the Republicans have stockpiled that money into the party committees, which is now going to be able to prop up these weaker candidates.
Well, one, it's easier for Elon or somebody to write $1 billion check or whatever they want to the party, one stop shopping, and then the party can distribute it where it wants. And, but it also sounds, crazy in that a majority of the Supreme Court thought there wasn't enough money in politics when
Yep.
every other American, I think, regardless of party, frankly, thinks there's far too much money in our awash in our politics today. Um,
I could
Before,
not agree more. And I think it is actually part of the whole system, right? There is big money that has helped capture the Supreme Court, and those justices are frankly being responsive to that money as well. So it is part of this entire system.
right, so it's basically first first one was companies or people, and they have right to free speech, and now it's the parties have the same First Amendment right to coordinate more directly with candidates. Um, what what do you think the Supreme Court is missing about corruption, influence, and how donors actually use this system, or you think they just didn't give a damn? They wanted to open the spigot always from the beginning with their first ruling on this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw in Citizens United, and to your point, Citizens United did a couple of things. It said money equals speech and corporations are people, but it said that that all of the spending in our elections would be disclosed and transparent so that we could root out corruption, and it would be fully independent of the candidate in order to combat corruption and kind of the quid pro quo corruption that we know exists in the system. I think that both of those findings were naive at best, or maybe just a cover story to begin with. But even if they truly believed that in 2010, there's no way that you could see the last 16 years of the system under Citizens United and still believe that today, right? The sheer amount of undisclosed money, secret money, even foreign money getting into our system has blown this idea of transparency and disclosure out of the water. And then the way that we are seeing big industries influence our policymaking, big billionaires influence our policymaking. And just look at this administration, right? It is a pay to play, corrupt merry-go-round every single day. I don't know, at this point, it is not just naivete that the Supreme Court was dealing with. It is an outright, they don't care about the corruption in our system. And to your point, voters really do care. Voters, no matter what their party is, Republican, Democrat, Independent, they really care about this corruption in our system.
So if you're a billionaire or special interest donor, what new door did this just open? I mean, what can they do now after this ruling that they couldn't do before? Can you explain it?
Yeah, well, it used to be if you were running for Congress and I wanted to make sure you were elected because you were going to rubber stamp whatever policy I wanted, which we should really talk about that, Joe. I'm down for that. Then it was that I could give you, whatever, it's like $3,900 in the primary and $3,900 in the general. And if I wanted to spend more on your behalf to make sure that you were elected, I had to go to a super PAC or a C4 organization or an outside entity to do that big spending. But now I can just give a pretty big, almost unlimited check to the party committee and can actually coordinate that directly with the campaign. And now that money is going to go even further because they are likely to get lowest unit rate for TV ads as well. So instead of having to pay the higher rate on TV costs, they are also going to be able to get candidate-based rates, which means that money is going to go even further. And basically what the Supreme Court said is, look, it's fine for this to all be in coordination with the candidates. So now candidates are in conversations where the limit isn't $3,900 per election. It's pretty unlimited checks that they're talking about.
Yeah, the RNC has roughly 128.5 million, I think, on hand and no debt, while the DNC has about 16.3 million on hand, but 18.5 million in debt. How does that imbalance, change the stakes of this ruling, as we head into the midterms? It's kind of obvious. Obviously, it's almost like a nearly a 10-to-1 advantage in terms of the party money that can now be coordinated with campaigns. But also, my guess is that the floodgates may have just been opened for, that differential is going to increase substantially as more of the billionaires start funneling more money into the RNC.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, right? So first of all, prior to Citizens United, billionaire spending in elections was about, I think it was 0.3% of total contributions into our elections came from billionaires. In 2024, that was 20% of our election, of the election money came from billionaires. And we are on track to be even higher than that in 2026. And just like, frankly, as a matter of parties, the Republicans have more billionaires aligned with them than the Democrats do on their side. And why is that? Well, because they get, more tax breaks and less regulation and more things that line their pocket. So then how does that play out? Well, let's take a race like Georgia Senate race. John Ossoff has been killing it. He's been running such an incredible campaign, and the people are coming out and supporting his campaign. He's raised $81 million and has $42 million cash on him, whereas his opponent, Mike Collins, has only raised $7 million in total and has about $2 million cash on him. That should be a huge advantage to Ossoff, but now the party committees can just step in and fill in that gap, right? And they can do it at candidate rates. So all of that grassroots support, that people-powered support that someone like Ossoff has spent this time building and cultivating, that advantage is really minimized by the party being able to come in and just dump unlimited amounts of money in for Mike Collins to prop him up when he hasn't been able to build the same kind of base of support.
Yeah, I mean, you point out that, obviously Ossoff has raised the majority of all that money from low dollar, people sending in hundreds. Obviously, I'm sure he's got what would have been the maxed out $3,900 contributors too.
Yeah.
But so it just shows like grassroots support, much more grassroots support. When you look at those two candidates and what they actually were able to raise and what they have in their coffers today, Ossoff is off the charts compared to the Republican, but now the party can come in and, like you said, just flood the zone. And that's what's one of the things I wanted to get at is, there are a lot of races now that are going to be exposed, to this problem. Obviously, Georgia, Maine, Texas, and House races where just a few million dollars can completely reshape the airwaves. And as part of that, Axios reported that the NRC ended June with $92 million, almost $93 million on hand, with the DSCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, with $79 million. And this is, again, I think both those committees now it's gonna let these party committees funnel more of that advantage directly into competitive House races. But what does that mean on the ground for swing district candidates?
Yeah, well, I think exactly kind of what we were just talking about, right? Like, number one, in a state like Georgia, where Mike Collins has had a hard time putting together money, the NRSC is now going to be able to make sure he's at parity with John Ossoff, who has spent years cultivating and building up this war chest and cultivating this level of support from individuals and from people. And to step back, like, why does it matter? Isn't that what we want candidates to do? Is to actually go connect with their voters and to build a base of support and to stand kind of in the public town hall and to say, here is who I am, here's what I believe, here is my message. That is what we should want candidates to do. And I think that what we're going to see by this one more avenue of kind of unlimited spending that can come in is you're going to see even less public access available to candidates, right? There are going to be less town halls, there are going to be less debates, there's going to be less of any of that because there's just going to be able to be this outside money and this party committee money that is going to be able to come in and prop them up. Now, here's what I would also say, and we can stay with Georgia Senate, but voters are sick and tired of the money. And we are seeing some backlash effects of just, it is not just that big money wins the day every single time.
Right.
Like if we look at Wisconsin Supreme Court race in 2025, where Elon Musk came in and spent $25 million, that race, which is normally decided by a razor thin margin, suddenly the Democrat won by 10 points because there was this real backlash effect to the attempt to try to come by that race. And we see that playing out in some primaries across the country this year as well, especially with kind of the big the big super PACs that are out there like crypto or AI that are spending big money now. So there could be the case that you could also see some of this unlimited party coordinated money having a backlash effect, but because
Yeah.
it's coordinated with the campaign, I just think it is going to prop up weak candidates and allow them to not have to build the base of support that frankly has been a real advantage to Democratic candidates. So I think it is going to be just like a harder landscape to compete in.
Yeah. So, I mean, Democrats have complained about dark money and super PACs.
Yeah,
Obviously, Republicans have often, basically done a much better job of weaponizing the rules more aggressively. And, like most, I think Democrats are trying to fight inside the system as it exists while, campaigning to change it. But how do you talk about campaign finance reform in a way that doesn't sound, procedural,
mhm.
abstract? But I mean, it should be easier, like this cycle, as you say, with crypto and AI, big, the tech bros spending, but how do you do it in a way that connects it to what voters already hate? The corruption, the billionaires, the rigged rules,
Yeah.
and politicians who don't listen. Maybe this is a year where that kind of messaging can turn the money back on them, like you said. We are starting to see some backlash.
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert on this, so you know this. You have helped so many candidates be able to talk about these issues in a way that really connects with voters. But here's what we see. Yeah, we don't recommend that folks go out and talk about the nitty-gritty of campaign finance law, but we know that voters are really, really concerned about corruption in our system. They are sick and tired of a Washington that is rubber stamping policy handouts for billionaires and the biggest special interest while they're fighting harder and harder to just make ends meet. And so, this idea, to your point, of the system being rigged or of them being left behind or of, the biggest donors or the wealthiest folks getting the handouts while they're being kept down, that all really resonates. And what we're seeing is that, yeah, economy and kind of costs are number one concern in voters' mind, but right under that is corruption in government.
Hmm.
And it is also because voters, we used to think that we had to connect the dots for voters, that we had to help them understand how corruption was impacting the prices that they were paying or the economy. We now know that voters are making that connection on their own. They understand that their prescription drug prices are getting more expensive, but that big pharma keeps getting handouts from Congress, or at the very least, that Congress is unwilling to stand up to a big
Right.
industry like big pharma. They understand that their gas prices are going up, but oil and gas is continuing to get billions and billions of handouts every year. We have done a lot of research on this over the last 10 years. This is not a partisan issue. Again, out on the ground, like Republicans, Democrats, Independents all feel this. But I will tell you that whichever party can win the who is trusted to take on government corruption, whoever wins that trait tends to win the election. So in 2016, this was the only trait that Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton on.
Right.
And he won it by 9 points. In 2018, Democrats were able to use the corruption in the first Trump administration and the Republican trifecta to drive up an 11-point advantage on this issue and to flip 40 seats. In 2020, people obviously thought that Trump was more corrupt than Biden. But in a cycle like 2024, voters didn't know who to trust. They're like, pox on all your houses. And
Right.
independent voters ended up actually trusting Trump more than Kamala Harris to take on government corruption. Because there's also a way that taking on corruption is also about bringing change to Washington, right? Those
Yeah.
are very connected in people's minds. And so this is about challenging the status quo. This is about changing the way that Washington works. And they are willing to send people who have a really proactive message on that. They're also willing to send people like Donald Trump who say they're going to take a hammer to the system because they are just fed up. So what we tell voters, and we're really excited, I mean, we are seeing candidates across the ideological spectrum and across the country run on these issues. And what we're telling them is it's not enough to just say the other side is sold out to money or is corrupt. You have to come with a how you're going to change the system.
Right.
You have to have that proactive message as well.
Well, when I ran the Dean campaign in 2003, 2004, and I really thought that by building a small dollar donor base in the party that we would, that this would be kind of like that, what we were pioneering was like opening the doors to people actually having more say and taking it out
Yeah,
of the hands of big donors. And I actually kind of feel sort of responsible because I think the reaction in the establishment of both parties was oh my God, we can't. The Democrats embraced it more obviously, and Obama did. But particularly on the Republican side, they were in power at the time, so they didn't need small dollar money. They were getting all the big checks, and I think that's what started to open up citizens. I mean, in other words, ever since then, ever since the power of like the average citizen giving $25, by themselves, each one. One of the things messages we said at the time was like, your $25 won't add up to a hill of beans against all the power that's out there armed against us. But if all of us do it, we can roll them. And
yeah.
people responded in that and did it. And so I guess the question I've got is there a small dollar strategy that still can compete in this environment? I mean, is there, or are we entering a phase where campaigns need, I mean, obviously we need both grassroots, but is it now, just as much and more important to have a serious donor infrastructure? I mean, what can ordinary listeners actually do? Not theoretically, but practically to fight against this new wave of money in our politics.
Yeah, I actually think small dollar donor fundraising is still incredibly important, and not just because I'm biased and we
Yeah,
have
no,
built
I do
in
too, but
Citizens
I
United
yeah,
on it. Um, but what we're seeing in, let's take some of the biggest Senate races. Let's take John Tester's race in Montana last cycle, right? That race all in both sides ended up being about $300 million. And for Tester's campaign, about 65 to 70% of the money that he raised, and I think he raised like a little over $100 million,
mhm,
came from small dollar donors, right?
yeah,
Which is just incredible. It is really incredible. Now, look, do we need less expensive races? Yes. Do we need less big money in our politics? Yes. But I do think it has still been an outlet to be able to have some balancing effect against kind of the unlimited big money that we are seeing in the, the system. I think what we
yeah.
see though is that these big special interests continue to put their thumb on the scale to tilt it their way. And I think this country is built on that push and pull between power and wealth being concentrated in the hands of a few, and the people demanding that they're taking it back, right? And saying
Right.
that we are going to change the system to give power back to the people. And obviously, here at In Citizens United, I mean, we're proud to be grassroots powered and proud to be a part of trying to help rebalance that. But I think that we have to, and we are seeing candidates who build these programs be more successful. And we have got to figure out a way to be able to put some meaningful reforms in place so that some of this money starts to come back out, so that some of the harms, we are able to start mitigating some of the harms that we've seen by citizens.
Well, that was actually a great lead into my next question that I was going
Oh,
to
look at
ask you.
that.
Yeah, because if Democrats win power, what reforms should be at the top of the list? Public financing, disclosure, anti-corruption legislation, Supreme Court reform, stronger coordination rules, or something else. I mean, what are the things that you're recommending, Tiffany, you and your group, are recommending or think are the most important for people to focus on?
Yes, yes. And yes, yeah. I mean, look, I think one of the things that when we talk about money in politics, I think one of the things that people feel both in DC and voters across the country is oftentimes pretty hopeless and pretty helpless, especially because we know overturning Citizens United would take a constitutional amendment or the Supreme Court overturning its previous decision. That being said, there is a ton we can do just through simple legislation that we could get passed tomorrow if we have the
Mhm.
right people in place. So, yes, disclosure and transparency has to be number one. We absolutely have to pass disclosure and transparency. And when we've passed it in states, we've actually seen some of that big money come out of the system because not everybody wants to be fully disclosed and transparent. Number two, we have got to have a cop on the beat. The Federal Elections Commission is
Yeah.
beyond broken. It is non-existent at this point. It hasn't had a quorum in over a year. We have to reform that agency so that we actually have a cop on the beat that can do real investigations and enforce the law. Number three, we can crack down on coordination rules. I totally agree with you about public financing. I think we should be leaning into what we have seen, because what we've seen in states and municipalities that have public financing systems is that it allows for greater diversity of candidates to be able to run and to win, and for those governing bodies to look more representative of the constituents that they serve. We can do that without actually having to, pass a constitutional amendment. Supreme Court reform, we could do that with legislation, right? We could do
Yeah.
ethics and gift ban and have it be enforceable. We could do term limits. We should do all of those pieces to actually break the connection between the Republican Party, the big money, and the Supreme Court. And we should do all of those in the short term. And we should keep working on the long term, needing to overturn Citizens United. We can do both. In 2018, when we took back the House, the very first bill in the new Congress was HR1. It was Comprehensive
Mhm.
Democracy Reform Bill that did voting rights and money in politics and ethics reform and gerrymandering. I expect that we will have something kind of similar up at the top of the agenda following this election. But there are additions and changes that need to be made because there are
Sure.
things we are seeing that we never saw before, like prediction markets, and
Yeah.
we have to ban stock trading too. I forgot about that one. Throw that one in too.
Yeah. So, big picture, we're running out of time. I've got this one, and then
Okay.
I want to give you a opportunity to tell people where they can find out more. But this is sort of the last of my questions before I let you, before I give you that opportunity. Big, and I suspect both of these can be true. Big picture, does this ruling make the 2026 election more important because democracy reform is literally on the ballot? I think that's probably true. Or more dangerous because the rules now make it easier for wealthy interests to buy the megaphone before voters ever hear the message. That's probably a
Also true.
question also true.
Yeah.
But what's your take on that big picture? And I mean, mine is sort of twofold. One is to actually succeed in 2026. If you're a small dollar person who's been giving, you need to double. This decision makes it even more important for you to double down, give more to these candidates. I know it's tough out there. I know it's hard. I know gas prices, all other stuff, but we got to dig deep into our pockets because trust me, Elon and the tech bros and everybody are going to be loading up now even more on the other side. So that one, and then two, we have to turn out and vote in numbers that are so overwhelming that that it's clear these reforms are, that people are for reforming this broken system. But I want to put that in you. That's my thoughts on the subject, but I want to turn it over to you. And then also, if you can just tell us where they can find more
Yeah.
information about, from where your, website, et cetera, Substacks, anything
Well,
you've got.
all the above. Yes. I think that both of those are true. I think what we are seeing is that democracy is directly on the ballot in 2026. And between the redistricting fights, this latest Supreme Court ruling, the Calais decision, and the gutting of even further gutting of the Voting Rights Act, there has never been an election cycle where democracy is more on the ballot. I also think that we are going to see even more big money flood into the system. And I think that in some cases, these big donors or big interest groups are trying out tactics in 2026 to feel out how they want to engage in 2028 during the presidential election. So there's also, we have to try to figure out ways to blunt the effects of these kind of big moneyed interests now in order to also set a kind of stake in the ground before going into 2028. So I think yes, in both cases. And if you're a small dollar donor, like we need you in this fight even more than ever. Everything, we need folks who are knocking doors more than ever. We need folks willing to make phone calls more than ever. We all need to be a part of the fight and to be a part of the movement and to do what each of us can do within that movement. So if you have not already, please go to incitizensunited.org to join us and to learn more. And that's our website, incitizensunited.org. You can find us on all of the socials. I think on Instagram and Facebook and X and Blue Sky, we are either End Citizens United or we are Stop Big Money. So please follow us at Stop Big Money. And then on Substack, we have a great Substack community, about 130,000 subscribers. We have regular newsletters coming out and great conversations with leaders across the country. And go to democracy.news and follow us on Substack. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Tiffany, for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening to or watching That Trippi Show. Make sure you join us at sez.us. It's a civil social network for real people, no bots, no algorithms, just organizing how we can all fight for 2026 and build a civil community that's actually engaged in solving problems. The podcast will always be free and is part of Lincoln Square, so check out the latest at lincolnsquare.media. And also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube or watching it there, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week. And I think Tiffany was an amazingly good replacement to the usual Alex Ashlow, who will be with us next week, I think, because, you know, he's been busy, but he'll be back. Thanks, Tiffany, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.